you really want to look at your best shots. You want to look at your worst shots is really the way to go. And then, depending on how many shots you're hitting, you don't want to hit too many shots with any one club. That's the other thing, because after about 2, 3, 4 swings, now you're fitting your swing to the golf club rather than the other way around.
This is The Tournament Code.
I appreciate you taking the time to join us today, Michael. I know that you're at Callaway right now. We know a little bit about you from other podcasts we've listened to. But before we talk about that and your history, let's talk a little bit before all that. How'd you get into the game of golf?
So I got introduced to the game. My parents had never played. I didn't have any grandparents who had ever played golf as far as I know. I had an uncle who was working a job and was literally forced to do a work event. And he went and played golf. I was pretty young at the time, but I was a good athlete and, a good baseball player and basketball player specifically, and which would kind of become what really was my main focus throughout my teenage years. But he's like, hey, you gotta come try this. This is a really great game. He had literally played 9 holes. That's all he'd ever done. He's like, hey, you really got to come do this. This is really fun. He took me to a little 9-hole course in LaPorte, Indiana, which was close to where I grew up in Chesterton. It's called Valley Hills now. I think it's changed its name since when I played it. Good gracious, now, wow, almost 38 years ago, if my quick math is correct. I think it had a different name when I played it back then, but I've forgotten it. It's called Valley Hills now. Anyway, if anybody wants to look it up, still a 9-hole course. Nothing special, but I really only remember one thing from the round. We went there, we rented clubs, and they were on this little rack. It was wheels and 6 clubs and not like a golf bag. But anyway, we wheeled it out to the first hole, and I didn't know any better. And now I know it was it was probably 90 yards. But again, I was a pretty good athlete and could hit a baseball and throw a baseball and shoot hoops and all that stuff. And I took my first swing and I hit 6-8 inches behind it, and the ball, I put it on a tee. And I actually hopped over the ball. I actually completely whiffed. Now I didn't know that was even a stroke, right? And I didn't know anything. I never played, didn't know anything about the game. So I just kind of looked at my uncle and he kind of shrugged. And so I stepped back up and I hit my second swing ever was it never left the flag stick. It was this 3-wood. I hit it as hard as I could. It never left the flag stick. Interestingly, there's a road in a cornfield. It's Indiana. There's always a road in a cornfield behind the green, and the ball flew, and it never left the flag stick. It flew directly over the flag, hit right on the front of the road, and then bounded into the corn. So those were my first 2 swings ever on a golf course. We didn't know about penalty strokes. We didn't know the rules, and it's interesting. I don't really remember anything else about the round. I don't remember the rest of it, but I remember that I loved it, and I didn't know it at the time. But now that I'm older, I realize I'm one of those all-in guys. When I do something, I do it 100%, and when I don't do it, I tend to not do it at all. But that winter, I got all into golf. I started reading, back then, Golf Digest and Golf Magazine were the big deal. So I loved to read. So I bought a bunch of magazines. And then interesting, the first golf tournament I ever watched, well, maybe maybe I had seen something on TV, but the first golf tournament I ever said, hey, I'm specifically going to watch this on purpose, was Sunday of the 86 Masters, which is Nicklaus's win. I had heard of everybody had heard of Jack Nicklaus. Even if you weren't a golfer, if you were alive, you knew who Jack Nicklaus was. Now, I didn't know he hadn't won. I didn't know that, he was 46 years old and on the downhill of his career. I didn't know any of that, right? I just know it's Jack Nicklaus. And, he made the Sunday charge. And I still remember Vern Lundquist's, yes, sir. Everybody remembers that. Interesting, if you watch it now, Vern Lundquist says that 8 times on the broadcast. But the Nicklaus one literally sent chills down my spine. I had played literally 9 holes of golf. And I went all in. So that summer, I played a ton of golf. There's a public course in Valparaiso, Indiana called Forest Park. And I think it was I'm almost sure it was $3.50 to play. And I didn't come from a lot. My dad worked at the steel mills, very blue collar. I'm the oldest of 8 kids. So money was a stretch for our family. I had a paper route, but I would go and play 2 to 3 days a week, and I'd have $5. That's all I had. But for $5, I could play, I could play 18 holes. I could get a hot dog and either a Snickers bar or a pop. I couldn't get both because I didn't have enough money for that. And that was my routine. I'd go play. I'd stop at the turn or stop afterwards, depending what time it was. And then my mom would pick me up and I'd go do my paper out, and then I'd go to basketball practice or baseball practice, or usually both in the summer. Quite frankly, I was doing a lot of that. So that was summer of '86, and I was all in. And I played a ton of golf that summer. And, again, that one round at 9 holes in LaPorte, and then, watching Jack. And again, I didn't understand what that meant at the time. I just knew, wow, this is cool. Or at least I thought it was cool. I found out later that golf wasn't cool to a lot of people, but I sure loved it. But yeah, that's what got me in the game.
That is cool. That is cool. And that's a nice introduction to the game. And it's funny you mentioned that thing about the yes, sir, because I watched just the other day, I have the DVD of that final round in 1986 and a little bit before, and I watched it. And you're right. There are a few different ones where he says, yes, sir. And that's what I always try to figure out. Like I remember the iconic putt, but when he said it earlier in the round, I was like, is that the putt that's supposed to be the iconic one? Because I've watched this a few times, but he said yes, sir here. So he did a good job working that in. So you get into golf, you get to play a little bit. Did you play golf much in your junior career, like as tournaments or anything, or did you focus on baseball or basketball, which it sounds like you were more into?
So I played tournaments. There, it's a very public course. Truly municipal course. They had a weekly junior league. I played in that, and they had tournaments. The Valparaiso First Bank of Valparaiso Open, and they'd have 8 kids in it. The Dairy Queen Invitational. I don't know if that was a real thing. So did I play in tournaments? Yeah, but I literally only played at Forest Park Golf Course. So if they had a junior event there, I played it. So did I play in 2 or 3 events? I played essentially every week, unless a baseball game or basketball game interfered. I played in weekly junior leagues. It wasn't like the PGA Junior League now, but it was still, we had to keep score. We had to turn it in. I learned the rules. I learned etiquette. And again, I played 2 or 3, but I was never a good junior golfer. I was okay. I think my best career finish, career is definitely air quotes. I think I finished 3rd in one of those tournaments, right? But it was just a way for me to meet new people and to enjoy the game. And I didn't take it that seriously. I wanted to get good. I wanted to improve, and I did a little practice. So we didn't have a lot of money, so driving ranges weren't a big deal. But I would hit plastic balls around my yard a lot. That was how I tried to get better. I once threw a 3-wood through a window, totally on accident. True story. Don't really want to get into that. I think my mom and dad still have PTSD from me doing that, but yeah, baseball and basketball were clearly my focus, and I worked very hard at that. I was much better at that, and I might have been better at it because I was a focus, right? I'm not, but I did play. I played a ton. I played as much as my time and finances would allow. But I was not. The AJGDA didn't exist, and if it did, they wouldn't have invited me. So
understood. So that kind of gets us to the next part. Is okay. You didn't play that much as a junior. And I think you played like as far as like competitive serious golf as a junior. That you played some around Forest Park. You played, I think, baseball at. Is that correct in college?
Yeah, so I was a very good high school baseball player, very good high school basketball player. I could have played, a little kind of, D3 basketball if I really wanted to, but baseball was really my passion. I got recruited. Unfortunately, I had a knee injury my senior year, and literally everyone stopped recruiting me. And it was a very eye-opening experience of the business of college sports. I was very naive. I was the first person in my family to go to college, so I had an aunt, I had one uncle who went to college, but everybody else was high school graduate at the end of it. So, it was all very new to me. And so I got recruited my junior year, and, thought that if they recruited you, they loved you. And then I got injured 3 games in my senior year, pretty serious knee injury, and find out that they would drop you like a hot potato. Everybody but Valparaiso University, which is a D1 school. Everybody's probably familiar with Bryce Drew's shot. I actually played against Bryce in high school, both in high school as well as some summer league stuff. He was a little bit better basketball player than me, but we played against him. So I went to Valparaiso University, played baseball there, had a second knee injury. And at that point, I realized I wasn't going to play professional ball. I was a really good defensive player. I had a big arm. but I was a truly average collegiate hitter. And actually, that's probably even generous. I was probably below average. I realized that I was, I ate high school pitching alive as a high schooler. But looking back, even the top high school pitchers when I was in high school, I just did okay with. And guess what?
Mm-hmm.
Only the elite high school pitchers are in college, right? So now I'm only facing those guys. So at that point, I had realized I was really good defensively. I could catch and throw and block and manage a game as well as anybody. But from an offensive side, I was average, and again, maybe even below average. I'd like to keep my ego a tiny bit and say I was average. But so after that second knee injury and all the rehab, I decided, hey, I'm going to be done with baseball. I actually went into coaching. I started coaching elite youth baseball immediately, and then as soon as my rehab got done, I got back into golf because I needed that competitive outlet. And I'd never stopped playing, but just baseball got such a grind. I mean, it's all summer, and living in Chicago area, there's only so many months you can play. So I hadn't played a lot of golf just because of baseball, and so when that ended, I got back into it really serious. My handicap, I mean, I don't even know what my handicap was kind of when that stopped, but I got it down into the high threes, low fours in literally a summer. That was the first time I had really said this is now important to me more than just for fun. This is my only competitive outlet. Still played a little, played a little pickup basketball now and then, but that and some good games, especially around Indiana with some good players I know. But when I got serious about golf, I wouldn't call it great or anything, but decent quickly, and I've generally maintained that. I'm a little bit higher handicap now, but generally maintained kind of that 3 to 5 to 6 range. Literally ever since that first year, like, okay, this is my future competitive outlet. I want to do it. And then a few years after that, graduated from college and got in the golf industry, and now it's literally a way of life, besides just fun and recreation.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit how you got into the golf industry from there.
Yeah, so I kind of worked. I got a job at United States Steel in college, and had worked there, and got a job there. And one of the things I realized is, I got promoted several times quickly. And again, now I understand that if you were young, it's a very aging workforce. I think it's still the case now, but even especially back then, if you were young and had half a brain, and that's probably, I fit both categories pretty well back then, that they would just promote you. And I got promoted into a job that, quite frankly, I'll admit now that I just absolutely hated. The boss was a really good guy. He was a good human, but didn't understand the work we were doing and didn't seem all that invested in it. I liked, the additional money, but just turned out after about 4 months, I'm like, wow, this is just, can't imagine doing this the rest of my life, quite frankly. And so I kind of took an inventory of my life. And I had this engineering degree, and I was married, and I had a kid on the way at that point. And what do I really like to do? And my wife Robin was incredibly supportive. We literally made a list. Here's all the things I like to do. Here's what I'm good at. And sadly, almost everything on the list was baseball or golf related. I mean, there wasn't a lot on there that wasn't baseball or golf related, to be really honest. And I had been building clubs back when kind of Golfsmith and Dynacraft and GolfWorks, you could order the components was still kind of a big deal. So about 2 years before that moment, I got into, I laugh at what I do now. I mean, laugh at it now because we didn't know anything, not just me, but nobody knew anything about, fitting. But I fit and built in clubs for myself and would sell them to buddies, and, basically just to get money to pay for more clubs for me and more golf for me. Anyway, so, I made this list, and I'll never forget it. This is, I mean, the internet existed, but not like we have it now. I was looking at the back of the Sporting News, back of Golf Digest, back of Golf Magazine, and I sent out 63 resumes and cover letters. I'll never forget the number. Literally every baseball and every golf company, golf shaft, golf grip, every place I could find. And this is back when you literally sent letters. I mean, I wrote a personalized intro and cover letter for everyone, and I put my resume in it. I had a baseball resume and a golf resume, and sent them to 63 companies. And I got 3 responses. I got one from Cleveland Golf, I got one from Callaway Golf, and I got one from Wilson Golf. I never heard back from any of the baseball companies. I never heard back from any other golf companies. I had interviews at all of those. I got offers from two of them. The third one I actually pulled out of, which is kind of ironic because the Callaway job didn't sound that interesting. So I had one interview and a phone interview, and they invited me to fly out there, and I told them no, which is interesting where I'm sitting now. But so I had an interview and got a job off from Cleveland Golf out in I think it was Huntington Beach then, kind of LA area, and Wilson Golf, which was in Chicago. And for a number of reasons, chose Wilson. So I worked there for 3 years, and then went to Adams Golf for 10 years, which was just an incredible experience. That's one of the best times of both my career and my life. I love what I did there, and then got to go back to Wilson Golf and run all of R&D there. I did that for 7 years, then did some consulting work, both in and out of the industry, actually working in oil and gas, but also a bunch of golf and sporting goods consulting. And then almost 4 years ago, actually by the time this podcast drops, it'll probably be 4 years, so I'll say 4, I got back to Callaway full time. So I've been in the industry 23 years-ish now. And like I said, it's paid for all 3 of my kids' college, and my daughter's getting married later this year. It's paying for that, and our house and our cars, and golf is truly it's become a way of life, which is interesting. Going back from literally 9 holes in LaPorte, Indiana, to now 23 years in the industry has been a long, fun journey. A lot of great moments, a couple heartaches here and there as life happens, but yeah, a lot more, way more good than bad.
Well, it's very providential then that you got introduced to it back then by your uncle, and things panned out the way they did. It's about all you can ask for, is have a good living like that. And part of that, though, that I'd like to dive into is just starting with some of the early stuff. You said you're at Wilson to start. What exactly was your role there? Because really one of the things that I want to learn as we're talking today is not just about golf clubs themselves, but what you've learned along the way. Because I know for me and Cooper, we made lots of mistakes when we were juniors. Even as recently as maybe yesterday, we probably misunderstand a lot of things about equipment. And so and I know the industry has evolved and learned more about equipment as things have gone on. So we'd love to see what you've learned and just get a lot of insight into that area.
Yeah, I got into golf in a really interesting time. It was 1999. It was the industry had just started converting over into real engineers. The industry for a long time was, and this hopefully most of these people are out of the industry now, but it was not offensive. But before then, it was really kind of good players who didn't make it. The vast majority of were people who were good college players or good professionals, but just not good enough. And they wanted to keep going, and they became club designers, right? And it was more about them literally on the grinding wheel going, well, I like this shape, and if I put a little cutout here, it feels like this, right? There just wasn't the science that we had now. So right around kind of early to mid 90s, some of the golf club companies, it's interesting where I'm at now, Callaway and Ping specifically, had really got into engineering. And then some of the other club companies were starting to play catch up. So, I was really, I think, engineer number 3 at Wilson. It was just getting started. I had really, I'm old enough that we had to do hand drawing of blueprints in college, but I got to do CAD at the end of it. And I really loved CAD, computer aided drafting. And I had got into some of the 3D stuff really early, just because out of interest. So that's one of the things that got me in the industry. Now I was the juniorest junior engineer at Wilson. In fact, most of my work was on package sets and shafts and kind of stuff that other people didn't really want to work on, to be honest. Most of the other cool projects other people took. But I showed a passion for putters, and Wilson, wanted to do some putter lines. We're talking about it, and I put some designs together. And quite frankly, looking back now, I probably shouldn't even been in the meetings, but they let me come and present my ideas, and my ideas won out and did some cool things. And interestingly, the biggest and best one got canceled last minute because of cost. I still have some prototypes at home. They've never seen the light of day. I'm super proud of them, but no one else has ever seen them. So I did that. And then, this little company called Adams Golf, who, everybody knew about the Tight Lies, but, then Tight Lies 2 came out, which was that they went public, and Tight Lies 2 came out, and it was a disaster. But this guy named Tim Reed reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for engineers. Your name keeps coming up when I talk to other people in the industry as somebody who's, kind of bright and passionate. And I went down to Texas and interviewed, and the president of the company was this guy named Chip Brewer, and I didn't know either one of them, but was really wowed with their vision, really wowed with their passion. I was wowed with the direction that they wanted to take golf club design, what was important to them, what they wanted to do with atoms, and people thought I was nuts. I mean, I had some people in shafts and grips who had been around for a long time, who mentors might be a bit strong, but I trusted them and called them and said, hey, I need to keep this on the down low, but I've got this offer from Adams Golf, and I really think I should take it. And every one of them said, do not take it. You're crazy. Wilson is stable. Wilson is Wilson. You can't go. You can't go. You can't go. My wife and I talked about it and prayed about it, and we just felt good about it. And so we took it. And it was one of the best decisions memory phrase it, the best decision I've ever made career-wise, for sure. Chip is now the CEO of Callaway Golf, modern golf, and everything he's been able to do. What we did, turning again, I was a medium-sized cog. I don't want to, Chip and Tim and a few others, Scott Blevins and some other people deserve a lot of credit there as well. But I'd like from a product side to take some of that credit. Turned it from a company that was hemorrhaging cash to something that was very positive, that was literally the number one hybrid on tour, dominant in that category, had really strong iron performance, did incredibly well in the women's category, over that course of 10 years. So, went from something that was, negative, I think literally negative $23 million when I got there, to nearly $100 million when I left. So a pretty good turnaround there. It was just a great time. And again, their vision and a lot of hard work. We were really small at the beginning. It was not exaggerating. It was a lot of 14-hour days, but we were passionate about it and we wanted to make it work. And again, a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, pulled it off. It was really great.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that my dad actually had a 3-wood, a Tightlize 3-wood that he's been using since he got it in the 90s. And just last week, 2 weeks ago, he went out to go play Pebble Beach. He's like, man, I can't keep hitting this. And I was like, well, go to the store, check out the Callaway. I think he got a used one. I think it was the Epic Max. We put him in a 5-wood, and he called me after playing out there. And he's like, man, I'm so glad you put me in this. And so it seems like maybe he's following you around as far as where you're working, as far as the clubs he's using.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I play a fair amount of public golf here in SoCal, and I guess it was, 3 weeks, a month ago, I was getting ready to play at one of my four favorite courses, and the guy had a full bag of Idea A7 irons, which were one of my favorite irons I ever worked on in my life. They were just, and I wanted to go over to the guy and go, hey, listen, I really appreciate you buying these, but it's definitely time to upgrade. But yeah, I still see them out there every once in a while. It's really great to see and know that, some of the stuff that I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in, not just got tour wins, not just got major wins, but, are really loved by people still today. If you're playing any of my iron or hybrid designs, again, it's time to upgrade.
Well, that's a perfect lead into when should somebody be upgrading their clubs?
Well, first of all, we want everybody to get fit. I want to stress that enough. Buying off the rack, really shouldn't be an option anymore. But I'm going to preface this as the answer is every year. But then put that on your fitter saying, hey, this is what I'm playing now. Do you have something that's better? And put that onus on the fitter. And then you can decide, hey, this got me 7 yards. Is that worth the money? Yes or no? Only you can decide that. You know the value of your money. You know what you can afford as a person or a family. So, I always say that, go try every year. Be honest with the fitter saying, hey, I'm not sure I'm going to buy today, but I'm interested in a new, like your dad, I'm interested in a new 3-wood, I'm interested in a new 5-wood. Here's what I'm having now. Can you beat this? And find that out. Now, if that's not comfortable for you or not something you're, even willing to do, literally, if you're using a driver more than 3 years old, you're most likely losing distance and dispersion from a technology standpoint. Fairway woods, I would say this was not true, but in the last few years, fairway wood technology is just, it's amazing what has happened there. So if you haven't bought a fairway wood in the last few years, I would say you're way behind, just because it's now, again, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that. You could use a fairwood a little bit longer, but fairwood technology is booming. Again, kind of similar to hybrids. Depending on the type of iron you play, if you're playing a blade iron, technology doesn't change that much. The grooves will wear out. Leading edge, depending on where you're playing, if it's very sand-based, you play at a lot of bunkers, that type of thing. But if you're using technology irons, again, every couple of years that technology is really going. But again, I challenge everybody to, if you're passionate about golf, it's important to you, and you're willing to spend, go every year. Go see what that technology brings. It's amazing, the R&D resources. Again, from when I came in the game 23 years ago to what technology looks like today with super computers, the ability to do analysis, predictive analysis before we even make parts. The speed at which we can make prototypes now is amazing. We can have an idea and a week later be hitting it. When I first got in the industry, 90 days was amazing. If you could finish a CAD model, hit send, and then get that back in 90 days, you were cutting edge. You were like, wow, best in the world. And now, I mean, that's literally, laughably bad, right? But just this technology has gotten so much better. So yeah, again, if you have a club that you love, doesn't mean you need to replace it. But if you want to play your best golf, and scoring and distance is important to you, then there's nothing wrong with doing that. Again, put that onus on your fitter, be upright and honest with them, saying, hey, I'm not promising I'm going to buy anything today, but man, that new driver is really interesting. Can we beat it? What can you get for me?
So when it comes to putting the onus on your fitter, but having to, take in the stats yourself, and I think one of the things that maybe this is preconditioned on is we hope that we end up with good fitters. We hope that we end up with honest fitters who aren't just going to try to sell us the most expensive stuff. But there are those people out there. If I'm out there, I'm getting fit for something. How and what lens do you look through to say, hey, is this improving my performance, and is it improving my performance materially to where I should maybe replace the club? So going from the 1999 to 2023 is like, okay, that's a pretty easy probably replacement 100% of the time.
Yeah,
but going from 2021, going from 2001 to 2023 could be a little bit harder to gauge. Is this actually improving my performance?
Really great question. I'm going to answer it in two parts. So bear with me for a second. The first part is, first of all, you need to trust your fitter. If you're not confident in your fitter, go online, look at reviews, talk to friends who've been fit. All of those things. That I just had this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who's kind of on the outside of the golf industry, but does some consulting with some movement stuff. And that's one of the things we talked about is the number of people who are willing to spend $2,000, $3,000 on a club and literally just go to the fitter because it's down the street, right? They'll look at 40 Yelp reviews before they buy a taco, but they'll just go to one fitter because they happen to drive by their place. That fitter may be great, right? But is that the right fitter for you? So again, I strongly recommend do a little research. What clubs do they carry? Do you have friends who've been fit? Do you have recommendations? I mean, there's a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of message boards. There's a lot of regional message boards for different parts of the country. Just go on those. Even if you're new, say, hey, I'm new. I just moved to Colorado. I just moved to Denver. If you go on a golf message board and say, hey, I'm looking to get fit, who's good around here? You're going to get answers. And so, do a little research. Don't just go in, and you want to trust that fitter. And then when you get there, you got to be really honest, saying, I'm here for a new driver today. This is my budget. This is how much I have to spend. Here is what I think my current driver does. And if you have on-course data, even better. If you're using Arcos, or using Shot Scope, or using Par Golf, or using Garmin. I mean, there's lots of them out there. I'm not advocating for any of those, but there's lots of them out there. You can say, hey, I'm missing 34% of my fairways left. I'm missing 21% right. And I hit it 275, or I hit it 235. That's really good information. Say, here you go. Let's work on this. And then in the fitting itself, you want to look at a couple things. You want to look at your best shots. When I absolutely nuke it, take your gamer in. You always want to take your current gamer in to compare. What are my good shots on my gamer compared to what are my good shots on this new club? And the thing with technology, you also want to look at your foul balls. I mean, being a former baseball player, if I rip one down the left field line and it curls a little much, I just walk back and pick up my bat and I get a new pitch. But In golf, I got to go play that thing. Unless it's Oscar Bravo, then you got to re-tee. But if it's just in the left trees, guess what? You got to figure that out. So technology, especially dispersion on better players' clubs, is the technology there is really improved. So you want to look at your best shots, but I also want to look at some of those worst ones and say, hey, remember that fourth shot I hit that I said was really toey? Can we look at that one as well? What did the launch do? What did the spin do? Where would that one have ended up? Yeah, it was 21 yards right, but you know what? Thinking about that, maybe my gamer, I'm 30 yards right or left or whatever your miss is. So, you really want to look at your best shots. You want to look at your worst shots is really the way to go. And then, depending on how many shots you're hitting, you don't want to hit too many shots with any one club. That's the other thing, because after about 2, 3, 4 swings, now you're fitting your swing to the golf club rather than the other way around. So it's that fine line. But when you get to the very end, right, you've gone through a couple heads, you've gone through a couple shafts, like, hey, this is what I'm fit into. Now let's hit my gamer and hit against this one back to back. Let's see what happens there. And find out what it is. And again, if you're gaining yardage and you're decreasing dispersion, now I can't tell you what, is it 5 yards? Well, I don't know. I don't know what the value of 5 yards is to you, right? If you're a billionaire, you'd buy that 5 yards instantly, right? Maybe, maybe money is a little tight. Yeah, 5 yards isn't enough. But, when you get to 8 yards, 10 yards, I don't see how any golfer passes that up. I mean, that's a full club. You can look at strokes gained, now you're talking right around 0.1, 0.2. So, if you can do that on 12 drives, if you're at 0.1, the math works out. You probably just lowered your handicap close to 1, just by gaining those 10 yards and now having one club last throughout the course of a round, especially now if you're adding a fairway or two on top of that, or more importantly, avoiding the trees or hazards or out of bounds or water or whatever's on your course. So, that technology is getting better and better from a data perspective, and people are understanding it more. I mean, I'm still not sure everybody understands strokes gained. I think they at least understand the concept of it, maybe not how it's calculated and the practicality of it. But anyway, that's a really long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's very helpful. And we stress the importance of strokes gained on here. So hopefully our listeners follow along if they haven't. I know that our episode with Lou Stagner had a really good explanation of it that I used to help explain it to people. But beyond that, we've talked about, okay, here's what I should be looking for in my fitting. But you mentioned earlier that 3-wood technology has changed. What has changed so much about it recently that people should be looking at that specifically? And actually, I'll rephrase that. Not 3-woods, fairway woods is what you said.
Yeah, and I think that's true of a lot of things. I mean, putter technology is really advancing. 3-wood technology is really advancing. But I would argue that all technology is advancing. I just think I think fairway woods have made bigger leaps recently from a technology, really from a material standpoint, from an understanding of face flexure, spin consistency, and some really a lot of things we learned in drivers as both Callaway as a company and the industry. We're seeing some others. I'd like to think that we are a leader in that category from a sales perspective. We do extremely well on tour. So I think it's a lot of stuff that we've learned on drivers. Like there's a lot of focus on drivers, right? That is the main club. It's that halo club. But there's more and more of that technology trickling down. The difference is, I think the industry as a whole used to go, we have this technology on a driver. We're going to try to just kind of cram it into a fairway wood. And now it's much more about, hey, we learned this from a driver. How do we apply this to make it optimal in a fairway wood? Again, if you look back 5 years ago and certainly 10 years ago, you see a lot of the same stuff in the driver and the fairway wood, but it literally wouldn't be different, just be a smaller version of it. And now with more technology and the ability to simulate more, to run more iterations using things like AI, which Callaway's a leader in, that we can say, hey, we this technology, whatever it may be, worked in a driver, but it has to be applied differently in a fairway wood. And now we know that rather than just kind of shrinking it down and cramming it in a 3-wood and a 5-wood. So it's much more taking learnings and applying them better because of having technology and the ability more iterations, more simulations, be able to prototype faster and finding out what works and what works and what works better rather than just what works, right? Because it worked before, but now we can kind of a good, better, best category we're getting in that best category earlier and faster, and now all the time instead of sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest complaints that people have had about Three Woods. I know I've had it, which is like a lot of times it's been a suboptimal club in that you have not that much forgiveness on it. It doesn't go, it's shorter than the driver, and it's still pretty darn hard to hit off the tee. And so, and off the tee, it's a little easier than off the fairway. But in either case, it's hard to hit and can be hard to stick greens with. And so, a lot of times, like for myself, I've taken a 3-wood out of the bag and just play a hybrid in there. And I know that a lot of people have started leaning that way, and that's maybe why we've had the advent of the mini driver, because it's like, okay, like if all I'm ever going to do is hit something shorter than driver off the tee, I'd rather have it be something like a driver. Tell us a little bit more about, one, how you guys are using AI and how that's effective in club design, and two, how you're also focusing on 3-woods and making them more playable and not necessarily something that people just have done what I've done.
Yeah, so I mean that's we'll cover the AI first. I mean, I want to make it really clear that just having a supercomputer does not solve problems, right? You have to have really smart engineers who are doing real world testing, data scientists, material scientists, doing real world testing, feeding that information in, and then asking the right questions and trying to solve for the right information, and then understanding the data to make good decisions. So, the AI is as good as the humans running it. So I want to make sure that's clear that, and then having the computing power to run enough iterations and simulations to make that worthwhile is really important as well. So that the human element is critical. But having said that, again, when I started in the industry, maybe you make 2-3 prototypes. And I told you earlier, like if you get one done in 90 days, that would be great, right? So we'd make these 2 or 3 prototypes, and then 90 days later, we could finally test it. Now we can do things, then we can simulate, because we understand the collision so much better, and because of proprietary software and engineering work, and be able to simulate things, we can, iterate small changes in face thickness, in materials, in strengthening elements, in where not just on the center, but on the heel and toe and high and low and all the way around. And we can look and say, hey, this one is reacting like this, and because we have the right head model and the right ball model. And then we can say, hey, this one, we've run 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 iterations. This one looks the most promising. And then we can prototype that in such a short period of time, and then say, hey, this is what it looks like digitally. This looks like we're going to get a signal from a performance standpoint. Now we can test that very quickly because the prototype faster, and then move forward. So, it really is that ability to make decisions. And, as smart as I am, as smart as our engineers are, we can't look at 3, 5, 8, 10 different variables at one time. The human mind doesn't work like that. But a supercomputer, if you have the right information, can, right? And that AI can machine learn, right? It does something, and did it move the CG? Did it change spin? Did it launch higher or lower? Whatever you're asking, hey, I want it to do this. You ask those questions. It's a little figurative. It's not exactly like that, but I'm trying to make it understandable for everyone. Mm-hmm. That we can find out, hey, this combination of a thickness here and a strengthener there and carbon fiber here and this other carbon fiber there and titanium this and some tungsten over there, all of that together makes the spin more consistent on low hits, or increases ball speed on heel shots, or whatever we're looking at. We can combine that all again, prototype it, and then test it both on robots, but more importantly in the real world with humans.
That makes sense. And then as far as 3-woods go and fairway woods, working with those.
Yeah, so that's what I call top of the bag fitting. I'm a big proponent. Everybody on earth needs a driver. Everybody on earth needs a putter. So we're down to 12 clubs, right? Everybody needs mm-hmm. some wedges, and then find out the longest iron that you're comfortable hitting, and then 2, verify that you actually hit that longer. You're a really good player, but at some point, for you it's a 2-iron. They don't exist anymore, but if they did, you might mm-hmm. hit your 3-iron longer than your 2-iron, right? Because of your club delivery, your spin, your launch, your speed. But for average players, that might be a 6-iron. They might hit their 6-iron longer than their 5-iron. So I'm a big believer in let's find out what that longest iron that you hit comfortable in. Again, Daniel, you're a really good player. Maybe it's a three iron, maybe it's a 4 iron, maybe it's a 5 iron. I mean, I'm a decent player and I don't want anything more than 5 iron at this point. I love my 5 iron, but I put a 4 iron in the bag, looked at my on-course data, and I lost strokes compared to the hybrid. So the hybrid went back in. So find that longest iron, figure out your wedge gapping because it's really critical, that scoring zone. And then you're going to go, how many clubs do I have left? So I have a driver now, and I have a 4 iron or a 5 iron. So this is tournament code. A lot of good players listen to it. It's probably a 4 or 5 iron, but maybe it's a 3. You know, if you're playing in the desert somewhere with not a lot of rough, doesn't matter. How many clubs do I have left? And then what do those needs to do? Is this second shots on par 5, or am I a really long player? And, you know, it's really going to be more about tee shots on tight par 4s. You know, you talked about earlier about then understanding is, you know, just because it's tighter doesn't mean you hit a fairway just because you hit a 3-wood, right? So is the course you have, does it have trees and rough, trees and severe rough and water really close to the fairway, or is it farther away where, you know, it's still more valuable to bomb driver, or it's like, wow, I really need to get tighter. And yeah, hitting 3-wood only, you know, depending on the player, is probably only 10 or 15% more accurate at best, but maybe that's all you need depending on your course, right? So then you have to understand again, how many clubs do I have? Be really honest. What am I trying to do? Is this a tee club? Is this a second shot club? Where's the courses I'm playing most often? If you are a real tournament player, what are the lengths of the courses I'm typically playing? What kind of second shot gaps do I might have? And then solve that. You know, it's interesting. I've had this conversation a lot, but you know, when golf first started 200 years ago, you bought literally every club individually, right? I need this, and I need a mashie, and I need this niblick, and you built this set. And then the Industrial Revolution came around, and now you literally at one point you'd buy 12 or 13 clubs, and here's your 13 clubs. I think we're going back the other way. I think, and the top of the bag is really critical, especially for good players, is get rid of I need a 3-wood. Get rid of that mentality. Get rid of I need a 5-wood. Get rid of I need a hybrid. Throw that out the window and say, what distances do I need a club to go? What are my gaps? And what do I want that club to do? And what is the best club to solve that problem? Is it a, you know, kind of a driver 2, right? Is it a more lofted, shorter? Is it a 3-wood? Maybe 4 or 5-wood is your next longest club. Again, I think we need to get out of that, oh, I need a 3-wood and I need a 5-wood because that's what everybody has. It's, I need a club that goes 245. I need a club that goes 220. The 245, I need to be able to hit off the fairway and off the tee. And the 215 club, the 215 club, I need to be able to hit it out of the rough, out of the fairway, and occasionally off the tee. And go, what's the best one for me? Is it a 3-wood? Is it a 5-wood? Is it a 7-wood? Is it a 2 hybrid that you actually turn stronger and now you only have a driver and 2 hybrids? Again, I can't answer that. That's going to depend on your delivery, the shots you want to hit, the courses you want to play, or courses you tend to play. So again, I'm a big fan of fairway woods, but I do want to get especially good players out of that mentality of I need a 3-wood. Maybe you do. A lot of people do, but maybe you don't, especially guys who are really long, who really have a lot of speed. What are you asking of that golf club? Again, maybe the 3-wood is the right club. Maybe it's not, but find your gaps, ask good questions, and go get fit.
So I think you're spot on there as far as 3-woods and fitting everything for a shot in the bag. You know, a lot of guys talk about certain players are loft jacking, those types of things, but really at the end of the day, like loft jacking or not, all you're really trying to do is fill a shot in your bag with a club. So it doesn't matter that much what's going on as long as it's functional. So whether your 7-iron is 33 degrees or 31.5 degrees, as long as there's a functional shot that's coming out of it that you can use on the course, I think that's what matters the most. And switching gears here a little bit, we've talked about your role prior and a lot of your club design expertise. Let's talk a little bit about your time at Callaway. You've been there for a little bit. Tell us about that role and what you do there.
Yeah, so it's fast approaching 4 years. In fact, by the time this drops, I think I may have crossed the 4-year threshold. So right at that end point. So it's been a great time. It's kind of interesting. I came on board and it wasn't too long. Then COVID hit. Obviously, that was a tumultuous time, and not only the golf industry but the world, right? And you know, especially again, my official title is director of custom fitting and player performance. It's a really long thing. And then, you know, when you weren't around, literally weren't allowed to be around other humans, you know, how do you fit? And so we did some cool things with phone fitting. In fact, distance fitting is still going on. Obviously that's much smaller now, but for people who you either can't or don't want to go see fitting, we have an opportunity there. But kind of day to day, I am focused on big picture fitting. I am focused really more about what fitting looks like in 18 months, in 3 years, what tools, what data sets, what different protocols that we can create and do to make fitting better. And that, I'm not on tour on a weekly basis by any stretch, but I talk to the tour guys. What are they seeing? What changes are they making and how they fit? What kind of different tests or combines or assignments can we give them that we can learn some things and apply that to really good players, people who are plus handicap, but also people who are 20 handicaps. How do we, transfer all that information? So I talk to a lot of the best fitters in the country, right? If I want to know what, if I want to help lead what, help Callaway be a leader and what fitting looks like in 3 years, I want to get great feedback now. So that's something that's really important. We have a national fitters board and a Team Callaway Elite, or there are different segments that we work with a lot, which is really great to get feedback from the field. And then the other part of my job is the, and player performance part. And we're continuing to look at ways besides just, hey, here's the right golf ball for you. And you need 2 degrees flat and let's go 1 degree weak on your driver. That's important. But we continue to look at other ways to help players play better. We're doing that on tour now in many ways, things unfortunately I can't talk about, but that's the type of stuff that will definitely trickle down in a very good and meaningful way to consumers at some point. So I hate to say it, but the best players in the world are also the best test bed, right? If it doesn't work for them, how is it going to work for everybody else? What does work for them? What is meaningful ways that we can see improvement in their games? I mean, that's harder. That's one of the great things about tour players, right? They are so precise and so good. And in many ways, they are playing a game that's different, even from a good scratch player. I mean, they are next level humans from a repeatability standpoint and understanding standpoint. But so again, there's great learnings. We take that. So there's the custom fitting side. Again, that's very future looking. I'm certainly involved in what's going on today, but my focus is really on big picture tools, data, protocols, different, experiences even to make fitting better. And then again, what can we launch in the future? Again, sadly, I can't talk about any of that. Mm-hmm. But ways that we're going to not just help you, hit your 7-iron 172 if you're a good player, or 122 if you're struggling, right? Both of those are good numbers for different players. So,
mm-hmm. No, well, in that case, we won't talk about the future. We'll talk a little bit about the present and what you've been hearing from tour players that you've been working with. I know that we have several buddies that play on the Corn Ferry, and one of them's not under contract on his driver at all, and he has the Paradigm with him, and he's had that out, and I was impressed with it. And I've used Callaway clubs before. I've used a variety of different clubs in my driver position, and I was impressed with that one. It seemed a little bit different than others. Tell us a little bit what you've been hearing, though, in general from tour players about equipment.
Yeah, so I mean, not to, obviously I'm going to wear the Team Callaway hat now, and I'm proud of that. Proud to be part of this great brand. But I mean, it's been an incredible year. As we're recording this, we have 9 PGA Tour wins. This is the week of Memorial, so hopefully I'm not giving too much away, but there may be more by the time this launches. It has been incredible. And obviously a lot of players, a vast majority of players have contracts, right? They're going to play, if they're with us, they're going to play Paradigm. If they're with a different brand, they're going to play their product. You mentioned the players who aren't under contract, and that is a metric that we track. How many players can we get who are free agents, little free agents, not to necessarily pay them or sign them, but willing to play the product for free? And, that changes a little bit week for week, but we've at least a few weeks recently, we've been leading that count. Obviously, maybe not the whole count. Some weeks we have, depending on who's in the field. But yeah, that free agent type thing we've done extremely well with Paradigm, with the Triple Diamond, Paradigm, and obviously the Paradigm X, which, this is a Better Player podcast. Very few would be playing that product. But, the Triple Diamond especially has been tremendous. The ability to really go low spin and be incredibly forgiving. That's really the difference in Paradigm. If I had to sum it up for better players, is that forgiveness factor with the low spin, because oftentimes when you get low spin, it gets a little uncontrollable, right? That you draw it a little bit or total a bit. Now it becomes a big hook because it is low spin. That's one of the great things about Paradigm, the ability of that 360 carbon chassis, which is little carbon fiber all the middle. We've got a titanium face and a titanium hunk in the back where we put some weight, but the entire middle is carbon fiber, and that really lets the R&D team push weights to extremes in ways that's never been done, not even our product, but any product before. So it's interesting. The best players in the world, I mean, yes, they are different, but they want the same things we do. It just, I might have a 30-yard miss, which actually isn't that bad, 60-yard wide. That's kind of actually average. But, how can we get them tighter and tighter? And it doesn't take much. You look at somebody on the PGA Tour, if we can get them literally 1 foot closer, that's close to $1 million on approach shots. And how do you get them 1 foot closer? I mean, people don't realize the detail that you have to go working with the tour player. I mean, it's great because we have so much data, right? From ShotLink and other things that we can get dialed in. But it is those things of where is this player missing and how do we help? So drivers specifically, again, the Paradigm's proven itself with lots of wins. We had a non-staffer win at Pebble Beach with it. Can't say his name because he's not staffer. We've had some other really good things as well. So it's been a big year for Paradigm. We're very proud of the product. I always love it. When I used to be in R&D and designing clubs full time, people say, "Oh, you can't make products any better. You can't make products any better." And it always amazes me. And they don't quite grasp the tools we have and what literally hundreds of people thinking full time, nonstop, how to make things better. What you can do. Paradigm's been a good example of that this year.
As I said, I've been impressed with it. I play Ping G30 just because haven't taken the time to update my driver at all in the bag. And that's one of the clubs when I go in to get fit, that's one of the clubs I'm going to be looking at, not to derail us on it, but that was one of the interesting things too with it. You mentioned that forgiveness was the sound was a little bit different, and maybe it's just that club, but the sound was a little bit different than Callaway clubs have been in the past. It sounded like as far as off the face, it sounds a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, so sound sounds so subjective, right? I mean, you mentioned a different brand; they're known to be a little bit louder, a little bit more obnoxious sounding, and for some people. But yeah, we get a lot of feedback from tour players. We get a lot of feedback. We have what's called a gold panel, which is really good players, and then we have this isn't what we call them, but a lot of everyday golfers, right? 10 handicaps and 15 handicaps. And we test with a ton of players. I know everybody thinks for an OEM it's a lot of our robot testing. We do some of that, but far and away the most important feedback is player testing, and sound is clear and is clearly one part of that. We've got some unique ways because we have more discretionary mass, the ways that we can adjust that. Plus we have AI and do some things. So yeah, I'd like to think we're always getting better. But it is subjective, right? What one person thinks is the perfect sounding, someone else may sound, maybe a little muted or a little too loud. But we are very proud of the feedback and the acceptance from all player types, but especially better players. Again, going back to LPGA and PGA and DP World Tour, we've been killing it over there as well. So yeah, sound is one of those personal things. But I've also found in the past that if you get up and if you want to hit high draws and you get up and hitting these bomb high draws, that driver suddenly sounds better. We hear that, we see that with putters, when putters back earlier in my career went from, kind of everything looked like a blade. And then, I call it the mashed potato era. There were some really weird looking putters, and most of them, because of the appendages and the size, they sounded different. But you get over a putt and you start making 8-footers, guess what? You're going to really like that sound. So
yeah,
you don't want the driver to sound bad, but if you get up and have the right numbers and have the forgiveness and have the the start line repeatability and spin consistency you're looking for, which again, I'm very confident Paradigm hits all those numbers. Even if the sound isn't perfect to you, it's going to get perfect pretty darn quick. So yeah, it can't sound bad. And again, no one has ever said the Paradigms sound bad by any stretch. But, there are certainly personal preferences out there, and there always will be. That's part of life. That's part of golf, part of humans.
I completely understand. Well, before we go into our final questions, I got 2 more questions. One of them is going to be looking a little bit forward, and one of them is going to be going way back to something you mentioned earlier. And so looking a little bit forward, you mentioned we can't talk about things you can't talk about. So if you can't talk about it, that's fine. But we talked with a friend of ours, Damon Burrow, has a company called Golf EQ, which essentially is helping solve the problem of, all right, I go to get fit, and I'm not just getting fit for driver heads. like I need to also be getting fit for the right driver head and the right driver shaft, because different combinations are going to yield different results based on my swing. And so what they do, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially
I'm familiar with the work.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Is that something that you guys ever see yourself, not golf EQ specifically, but that's that concept, whereas, hey, we can narrow down what's probably going to be best for you in a fitting? Is that something you see you guys moving towards ever?
Yeah, I would argue we do that now. Quite frankly, through a lot of training, we have we think the most extensive, and we also think arguably the best fitter training program in the industry. We have online classes. We bring literally hundreds of top fitters across the country to Carlsbad every year. We're a big believer you fit head first for a couple of reasons. I'll try to make it brief, but the head is very repeatable, right? If we move the weight heelward, we know what's going to happen. If we move the weight toeward, if we move to a driver where the CG is more forward or more back, we know what's going to happen. The physics dictate that. Shafts matter. I want to make that crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
Shafts matter. The problem with shafts, if that's the right term, I'm not sure it is, but the problem with shafts is they are not predictable. Just because a manufacturer says, hey, this is a low launch, low spin shaft, a majority of players will generally launch it lower and spin it less. However, a not insignificant, typically double digit percentage wise, are going to hit that higher and spin it more potentially. So that's the issue with shafts, is there is no, if I give this shaft to a player, every player is going to do this. The body is an amazing thing, but if you get a shaft for a player who might feel torque more, they're going to react differently to a player who doesn't react to torque more. If there's a player who affects bend profile, they might release it a little earlier because, wow, this feels too stiff from them. I mean, the back of their brain, right? This is all happening in split seconds, but the back of their brain is going to go, oh my gosh, this feels too stiff. It feels different than what I'm used to. So I'm going to release it a little bit early. And all of a sudden, that low spin all of a sudden is going higher. Why is that? Because their body reacted that way. So again, shafts matter. We train our fitters. We work with the best. We work with Fujikura. We do a ton with Project X and True Temper and Mitsubishi. They're not Mitsubishi Ray anymore. The Mitsubishi Chemical. And Graphite Design. Right. We work with all of them, and we believe shafts matter. But shafts are much more individualized than people realize. So that's one of the things. What I call bucketization. You can swing and I can probably get you in a bucket of shafts, meaning, hey, here's 5, 6, 8, 10 that are probably going to work for you. And I'm pretty confident in that. But even then, because your body, your swing, your history, maybe you started off with clubs, maybe your dad was a really good player and had X1 dynamic gold X100s, and then he cut them down and you were literally playing with rebar when you were younger. That happened, right? Your body remembers that. That's what you learned growing up on. That's going to have effect even 20, 30, 40 years later on how you react to a shaft. So again, shafts matter. I never want to say they don't, but they're just not as predictable. Heads are very predictable. I give you more loft, the ball's going to go higher and it's going to spin a little more. I guarantee you. Now, obviously, impact location matters. That's something that better players certainly understand. But if I give you a driver and the first 3 are low off the face, guess what? It's going to launch low and spin more. That's physics. That's the way it works. So you have to pay very special attention to impact location in all fittings, but especially shaft fittings. That's another thing I see is, people change shafts and all of a sudden hit it off the toe and like, oh, this is a draw shaft. I mean, I've actually heard that, which is crazy, but they don't understand, right? So, what I say, and I'll finish on this, we can get the other questions. The main purpose of the shaft is we want to swing it as fast as possible, as consistently as possible. And the definition of consistency is, how can I deliver can I deliver the club face on the center of the ball more consistent? Those two things are more important. Yes, we can look at spin, we can look at other things, but until you can hit the center of the face most consistently at the fastest speed possible with that shaft, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Well, that makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that. And then now the question that goes back, you mentioned when you were with Wilson that you had worked on designing a putter and spent a lot of time with designing it, had worked in concepts that you thought were important, and then it never, it got approved, but it never got produced, manufactured, et cetera, at scale. What were some of the concepts that you were toying with when you were making that putter, and what were you thinking about at that time?
Yes, that would have been probably 2001 timeframe. So some of the people listening to this may not have been born yet, but it was a fun project. It was a fully milled putter line, and really I was trying to take milled putters and advanced technology, right? I mean, milled putters still today are much more about feel, much more about look, much more about sound. There is a performance factor, but that specific project, again, that I can't talk about, that died on the vine, unfortunately, was really at looking at ways of how we can take really advanced materials and the best science at the time, which again, 20 years ago, so things have changed, and put some of that technology into milled putters. It's interesting. Again, more stuff I can't talk about, but I'm obviously on the fitting side, so we're looking at some testing. But some of that stuff is coming in new and better ways that people can look out for in the future. So I was really proud of that project. It didn't see the light of day, but I think some of that stuff's going to come around and go around. I mean, there's just putter fitting is more and more players are getting fit for their putters. Thank goodness. I do hear people say, well, I've never got fit and I love this putter. That happens, right? You can self-fit into a putter or you select a putter and you change things to putt well with it long-term. Both those things happen. But obviously, we everybody's on board with getting fit for drivers and irons and even fairwoods now. The last two realms, and arguably the most important, I do mean that, are putter and golf ball, and we're finally getting more and more of that. So, continue to look out for technology. Obviously, sound and feel matter in putters. Alignment is really critical in putter. The ability to return the face square is the most important thing. But there's other cool stuff coming down the pike that I'd like to think Odyssey is going to be a leader in at some point. We're already the number one putter in golf, number one putter on tour. So we do have a clear leadership position, and I'd argue technology as well, but there's more good stuff coming down the pike.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. That fitting point is very, very applicable. And that's something that I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier or not. I've actually been running a test between two putters. They're both Odyssey. They're the exact same, except one of them has an arm lock / wrist lock grip on it, and the other doesn't. And I think the fitting thing is it's best described or best illustrated by arm lock putters. If you buy an arm lock off the rack, it's pretty hard to get it to fit right. Whereas if you get one custom made or get fit for it, it works. And it just so happens that with standard length putters, that issue is not as pronounced as in that you don't feel it as much, but there's still that issue that getting fit for the putter is highly important to make that putter function properly for you.
Yeah, it really does. It's interesting to do a head-to-head test. I mean, I was putting great with the 2-ball 10, the Odyssey 2-ball 10 putter. This would have been, I guess, 18 months ago or so. And I didn't really want to switch. I'd literally been putting the best of my life. I have data showing that. And the 2-ball 11 came out, and I'm a good company player. So I said, I'll try it. And I did a 2-day test, head-to-head, the 2 and 11, and the 11 won. I mean, it was kind of like, wow, things continue to get better. It was interesting. I do the same thing every year. I mean, again, I'm very blessed to work at a great company and have clubs and tools available that, most people have access to, but not all of it, especially some of the ability to test some things. And I do the same thing. I always want to play the most up to date. And my bag right now is I've got a Paradigm driver, a Paradigm 3-wood, Apex UW, Apex Pro hybrid, and then Apex Pro iron. So I'm playing generally new stuff, but the putter I don't want to leave that one, and the new one was better. So if it's better, it goes in the bag. I mean, I'm different, but at the same time, I'm just like everybody else. Give me what helps me play best.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect lead into our last question. The last question we ask every guest is, if you could go back to yourself as a junior golfer, tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be? And for you, because of your role, we also would like to hear from you. If you could tell a junior golfer one thing, what would that one thing be? So it's 2-part here for you.
Yeah, so if I could tell what a junior golfer to do is to keep playing other sports. I know specialization is so important. Is so prevalent today. And you just don't know where you're going to wind up. And, the more we learn, and, some of the projects I'm working on, again, that hopefully one day will come out, the more we understand about motor learning and how to get a golf ball, a golf club back to the golf ball, and some of the better ways to do that, and some things that, historically, we've been using as teachers or as an industry that, it does work, but maybe there's better, more efficient ways. If you're a junior, keep playing other sports. There does come a time probably where, but that time is, you better have a driver's license at least before you specialize.
Mm-hmm.
Go shoot hoops, go play baseball, go run around a soccer field. There's muscle development, there's skill development, there's brain development there that is really critical. So that's what I would tell everybody is keep playing other sports. And then I'm contractually obligated, but I believe this, but go get the right clubs. I mean, I joked earlier about dads with the best of intentions, cutting off their dynamic gold X100s, 130 gram shaft, and then they cut 4 inches off of it. And it's literally stiffer than anything that anyone's ever hit. So now I do understand there's cost constraints and, sometimes you have to do some of that hand-me-down stuff. And, but even if you're going to do that, I'd recommend, go find some used clubs that are better. I mean, you can save some money there. If you can't afford to get fit and buy your youngster all new clubs, I understand there are financial constraints out there, but so yeah, keep playing other sports and try to get things that the player can actually swing to develop good rhythm and tempo and a way to deliver the club head. As for myself, I wish I would have taken golf. How would I played as much as I possibly could back then, that my finances and schedule would allow. But I wish I would have done more of the social stuff because I went to the course and, my normal peer group, didn't play golf. That wasn't what they did. So when I went to the course, I was almost always paired with, 3 other juniors that I didn't know. And I wish, and I had a really good time and, we had a great 4 hours, right? But it didn't translate into like friendships off course as much as I wish it would have. I look back and, a few of the guys who I went into playing with a lot, we had a lot in common, and maybe they lived a town over or 2 towns over. There wasn't social media then, there wasn't cell phones, right? I couldn't send them a text, and so it was harder to keep up with them. But I look back and there some guys who I literally haven't talked to in 30 years, and honestly, if they crossed me in the street at this point, I wouldn't recognize them, right? Because it's been so long. But boy, we had some good times at Forest Park Golf Course, and kicking it around. And I wish I would have been able. Again, it was a different time. Literally rotary phones, right? There's a whole different world back then. But I wish there was a way I could, kind of connect with those guys and say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. And, I stayed in the golf industry, and, I appreciate you guys being nice to this guy who, knew nothing about golf, right? I didn't have parents who were in it, didn't have a legacy of golf. But I was passionate about it. I loved it. And played it, but it was kind of, ships in the night type thing. And I don't regret it. It's nothing bad, but yeah, if I could go back in time, I'd figure out, knowing what I know now, figure out how those could have been more lasting friendships. And again, I think it might've been just time and place as much as anything, but that's my one.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good thing to look back on. I know for Cooper and I, it worked out. Almost all of our friends are guys that we grew up playing golf with, or guys that we play golf with now. So even now, it's still a blessing to make those friendships. So all that being said, we appreciate you joining us. Where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out to you, ask you more questions, etc.?
Yeah, and please do at VGolfman on pretty much all social media platforms. Now, having said that, I don't think I've posted on Instagram in about 15 years. I'm on there. I do comment, but I haven't posted a picture. But I'm very active on Twitter. I've got my Monday golf poll. I've got my Friday random golf thoughts that I do every week. Some of those are fitting related. Some of them are just golf life related. And I do my best to answer fitting questions. So go on there. Again, follow at VGolfman. You're happy to send me, whether it's a public tweet or a DM. I try to respond to all of those. So Twitter's kind of my thing, but I am on most of the other social medias, but always at VGolfman.
Perfect. Be sure to give Michael a follow. And then if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave us a rating. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This helps us get our message out to more people. And if you're trying to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at The Tournament Code and on Twitter at Tournament Code. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to join us and dive deeper into what it takes to play elite tournament golf.